Everyone. So we're going to attack the Catbook debugging challenge, step 1. So before we get into it, I'm going to git checkout. Well, I'll git reset just to make sure that I don't have anything there, because I don't need anything. And then I'll git checkout debug challenge. All right. I'll make sure that npm start and npm run dev are running properly. And now, before we do anything, let's just see what's going on in, Catbook. Okay, what does this error say? It says let cannot be used as an identifier in strict mode. I don't know what the heck that means. I don't know what the heck this means either. But I do recognize, okay, syntax error in the feed.jsx file. So I'm going to click on that. Or rather, I guess I'll just go here. Feed.jsx. Oh, and I get a red thing from my VS Code saying reverse story objects, comma expected. I don't know what that means, but I do know that in a .then, the argument to a .then is a callback function. This right here is not a function definition. A function definition has parentheses where you put in the input, and then an arrow, and then curly braces to denote the body of the function. So there, that's one thing fixed. But then notice how here we're using this thing called stories response. So probably that would be that wouldn't be defined unless we defined it here. I'm assuming that's going to be an input to my callback function. Now, what does stories response actually represent? Well, in this case, we do a get request to /API/stories, and then we take whatever we got, which is stories response, and that gets fed into this callback function as stories response. So then that's a list of all the different stories. So we just reverse that list and then set that our React state to the output of that, or to the reverse list of stories that we got back from our get endpoint. So let's see if that works. We'll refresh the page. Oops, need to make sure I save my file. Oh, 404 not found. Phenomenal. So in this case, since the error is on the browser side, it might be that I always like to check the browser console first. So let's see. Oh, reference error, props is not defined at single story. So let's go to singlestory.jsx. And here we're using props.creatorName and props.content. Clearly this single story component is supposed to take in props, but right now we are not taking that as an input to our function. Remember that a React component is just a function that takes in props or takes in some kind of information and then spits out HTML, or more specifically JSX, which is basically like a React version of HTML, based on those props. So we need to take in the props as an input. All right, let's go back and see if we fix things. Okay, that's promising. This looks a little bit better than before, but oh, in my console I have these errors. Get something not found. Okay, that's odd. And it says here it's /API/comments, and here I'll notice that I can't see the comments. So clearly there's some issue with the GET request that allows us to actually get and display our comments. And if I want to look into more detail as to what these requests actually are, I can go to the network tab and see where, so I get this error in the response that says root not found. And then the request URL, it says localhost /API/comments parent ID = 3. Well, that's odd, because typically when we send a GET request, there has to be a question mark that separates the URL that we're requesting from the query parameters. And here there's no question mark between comments and parent. So that's probably where the error is coming from, but we don't know where exactly that question mark is, like coming, where that should go. So here, let's look at where this comments GET request is being sent. I could search around and find it, but I know off the top of my head that that's in card. So I'm going to open up card. By the way, if you want to search for a file, you could just do Control, or I'm guessing on Mac Command and P, and then type in the name of the file. Okay, so I'm going to look at where this GET request is being made. Here, I use the built-in GET function, or the Web Lab staff provided GET function, to get /API/comments with this parent. It seems like here is not where we're actually constructing and putting together the URL for the GET request. It seems like that logic has been compartmentalized into this GET function. So let's go to where that's defined. I'll right-click on that and go to definition, and it takes me to utilities.js. Ah, here it is. We do const full path, which is just the full like thing that you might put in a URL bar, like the full URL basically, is the endpoint, which in this case, when we called get, was /API/comment. So it was /API/comments plus the parameters that we passed in, which in this case is parent props.id. It seems like we're supposed to have a question mark, but we don't have one between the endpoint and the parameters. So I'm just going to add that. And now let's see what happens. Let's refresh the page. Ah, it works. And so now you'll notice in the network tab that these comments are made to the correct URL. Now they're being made to our localhost /API/comments, and then the question mark, and then parent, and then our query parameters afterwards. Great. Now we can correctly view our comments. All right, let's test things out and see if there are any other bugs that we might be able to find. Oh, well, one bug here is that typically we're supposed to display whoever wrote the story, but right now these are just blank. So I'm not getting any errors or anything, but it seems like something is not displaying that should be displaying. So let's look at where that might be coming from. I'm just going to pull up real quick to reference the React component tree. It seems like, okay, in feed, there's card and then single story. I'm guessing single story or maybe card is where the creator is supposed to be displayed. So let's check both of those and see where the issue might be. So let's go into single story. Ah, here, single story is the one displaying the creator name. Here, and it's passed into single story as a prop. Well, it seems like there's no problem with single story just taking the prop and displaying it. So let's see where single story is, where we're actually like creating a single story component. What's the parent of the single story component? If we look at our React component tree again, then we notice that the parent of single story is card. What does that mean? Well, that means that card has this single story component defined within it. So remember that a parent and child relationship in React is just it just means that there is a component inside of another component. So here there's a single story component inside of a card component right here. And that's what it means that single story is the child of card. Okay, so here in card, we're passing in an ID, which looks like the same as what single story expects. And then we're passing in a prop called creator with the prop creator name that card received from its parent. But that's kind of odd because here it names in card, when we're passing this prop into single story, we're naming it creator. Whereas here, it looks like single story expects the prop to have an attribute called creator name. So this disconnect is what creates the problem. And so we just need to make sure that this is named the exact same thing when it's being passed into the single story component as when the single story component is receiving and using that prop. All right, let's see if it renders properly now. Cool, now I can see who wrote all of my stories. All right, and then let's try posting a story. That works fine. If I refresh the page, let's try posting a comment. And if I refresh, oh, what happened there? If I refresh the page, my comment is gone. That's odd. So what does that mean? Well, since I type in a comment here and it displays properly on the front end, that means that the front end knows the comment that I typed. So there's no issue with me like typing stuff in and then hitting the submit button. It's some issue with how that information is getting sent to the back end, or maybe how the information is getting stored in the back end. Some lack of getting sent properly or getting stored properly. So this will require us to trace the whole line of how this comment gets sent to the backend. Okay, so I know that when I type in the comment and then hit the submit button, that's in the new comment component. So I'll start my search there. Let's go to new comment. Oh, that will be a new post input.jsx. And then here I've defined my new comment component. Okay, so here I have a new post input with this on submit, and then I pass in a function called add comment. And what happens with new post input is new post input takes in that prop, the on submit for new comment. And then it says the on submit should be a function that's triggered when the post is submitted. So basically, as soon as I hit the submit button, I know that the function that I pass into the on submit for new post input will be called. So the function that's called in the case of a new comment is this add comment function, which is defined right here. So what I have in here is exactly what I want to happen when I hit the submit button in the comment typey thing. Well, that's reasonable enough. But then here's something interesting. The add new comment function is calling this add comment function is calling this add new comment function that was passed into new comment as a prop. Well, that's kind of odd. What is that doing? And that to figure out where that is, we need to figure out what the parent of new comment is. So here, I'm gonna just take a look at my nifty component tree again, and notice that here, new comment is a child of comments block. Okay, so let's look at comments block and see what's going on there. Just going to here, comments block. Just as we expected, comments block imports new comments. That's promising. And here it looks like, oh, here inside comments block where we have a new comment component. But here it looks like we're just passing down for the add new comment prop, passing down whatever we receive from comments, the parent of comments block. So here there's an identical prop, add new comment, that we're passing basically through comments block from whatever's above comments block. So let's look at our component tree again. Oh, it looks like new comment is the child of comments block, which is a child of card. So let's go to look at card, because it looks like the add new comment function might have been originally passed down to card and then to comments block and then to new comment. If we open up card.jsx, card is the parent of comments block. Oh, this looks promising. An add new comment function. Let's just make sure that this is exactly what we think it is. Okay. So here inside card, there's a comments block because comments block is the child of card. As we can see, comments block is below card in our component tree. And that is passing in this add new comment function, which is defined right up here in card. Okay, so now we can figure out finally what this does, what add new comment is actually doing. Here it's just sending a post request to /API/comment with whatever it receives as an input to this function. Okay, so this is a function that takes in some kind of input and just sends that input directly as the body of a post request to the backend. All right, interesting. So when do we call this add new comment function? Well, in new post input, we saw earlier that this is the place where the add new comment function is called. So this add new comment function is defined in card, gets passed down through comments block and then to new comment, which is this component here. And then in new comment, it calls this function with this whole representation of a comment in as a JavaScript object as the input. So we call this function, and what that's going to do is it's going to call the function that was defined here with all of this as the input, and then it's going to pass that into the post request to the backend. So eventually what gets sent to the backend is this stuff right here that I have highlighted. So now we just need to make sure that what we're sending to the backend here is what we want to be sending to the backend and what the backend expects to be receiving. So I'm gonna get rid of these guys for the time being so we can just compare this, and I'll just reformat it a bit so it's a little easier to read, is what the backend expects to be receiving. So our backend is defined in API.js, and we'll split screen that. And this is the post comment endpoint that's going to be receiving this as its body. Okay, so here we have, it just takes in the body, which is this comment, which is this thing, and then adds it to our list of comments, and then sends it back to the front end. Okay, interesting. Well, that doesn't really quite tell us what we expect the comment to look like. But here's I suppose, okay, one thing I could do is if I'm debugging and I'm not sure what this backend expects. Well, one, if I'm writing a backend, this is a good reason why we have API documentation, which this API is not super well documented. So when you're making your apps, you typically want to write up a document that tells like you as the developer exactly what your backend expects to receive. But since we don't have that yet, and we're gonna add that once we do databases, I'm just gonna look at what the comments look like and just see if the format matches properly. So here I have _ID, that's present here. Okay, that's promising. Here I have creator _name with a string. Here I also have creator _name with a string. Okay. Here I have parent and then some string. Oh, well, that's interesting. This says parent story instead of parent. Dang, it's a different key name. So basically JavaScript won't be able to understand what that is. And the reason that our bug looks the way it does, as in I can add a new comment, but then when I refresh, it's all gone, is because we're adding a comment to this that has the field attribute parent story equal to something, not parent. But when we get the comments, remember, we're filtering out for the comments where the attribute parent is equal to the parent that we're looking for. And so if these new comments that we're adding don't actually have the attribute like parent, just parent, not parent story, then JavaScript isn't going to know what that is. And parent's going to be like, this is going to say like undefined. That's not going to be equal to anything. All of our comments will just kind of be disappeared. So we just need to change this to be parent, and then hopefully we will be chilling. Okay. And we just refreshed and it stayed there. Amazing. And this is all of the debug changes that we had for the original debug challenge branch. This was hopefully the video went a little fast, but if you really take the time to sit down with it and make sure you understand how everything works, then I hope that it will be a good way for you to learn. Thank you.